cruelty, discrimination, inequality, interference in domestic affairs of other countries, and denying their rights to self-determination and injustice are only some root causes of war and armed conflicts around the world. Violations of economic and social rights lead to war and lack of peace and stability around the world. Based on annual reports, the global peace is deteriorating and instability, war and arms conflicts have been increased since the past decade, in particular in North Africa and Middle East. The situation in Palestine, Afghanistan, Iraq, Syria, Lebanon and Yemen are only some examples of peace. At the beginning it was focused on negative peace, which means the lack of war and violence, but gradually this concept developed towards positive peace. This means that the global society little by little paid more attention towards the importance of human rights and promoting and protecting human rights as the necessary positive aspects of peace. The peace itself is a part of human rights, and we have the right to peace, which is highlighted in different human rights documents as well. In the General Assembly resolution on the Alliance for Peace in 1950, the concept of peace was only focused on preventing conflicts and ending violence, war, and interference in other countries. But since then, the concept has been much transformed. UNESCO, during its 28th session in 1995, emphasized that establishing peace is provided with promotion of human rights. In the UN Secretary General's Agenda for Peace, Preventing Diplomacy, Peacemaking and Peacebuilding, which was adopted by the Security Council on 31st January 1992, in paragraph 3, there is an emphasis that maintaining peace and security and securing justice and human rights and its promotion is necessary. In paragraph 5 of the same agenda, it has been mentioned that it is a necessity to address the root causes of war and armed conflicts and to devote more efforts toward respect for human rights and fundamental freedoms and economic and social sustainable development. In many other paragraphs of the same agenda, like paragraph 13, 15, 18, 55 and 56, there are references to the linkage between human rights and peace. In the Declaration and Program of Action on a Culture of Peace, which was adopted by the General Assembly in a resolution dated 6 October 1995, there is also emphasis on human rights. It has been mentioned that peace is not only the state of lack of war, but there is a need for lack of inequality and discrimination, which are of human rights values. In Article 1st of the Declaration, there is a reference to the respect for human rights and fundamental freedoms. In other paragraphs, such as paragraph 12, 13, 14, and others, there are many references to the importance of human rights and its implementation. In 2019, the resolution on International Year of Peace and Trust, which was adopted through 73rd session of the General Assembly, also mentioned that peace, human rights, and development are three pillars of the United Nations, and they are interrelated. So these documents, which some of them I referred to, confirms the necessity and the linkage between peace and human rights and how these two concepts are interrelated. In the second part of my statement now, I would like to refer to the relationship between UCMs and lack of peace and the threat that UCMs bring for peace. In the Agenda for Peace, there is a section entitled Sanctions and Spatial Economic Problems. Paragraph 41 says, in circumstances when peacemaking requires the imposition of sanctions under Article 41 of the Charter, it is important that the states confronted with the spatial economic problems not only have the right to consult the Security Council regarding such problems, as Article 50 provides, but also have a realistic possibility of having their difficulties addressed. I recommend that the Security Council advised a set of measures involving the financial institutions and other components of the United Nations system that can be put in place to insulate states from such difficulties. Such measures would be a matter of equity and a means of encouraging states to cooperate with the decisions of the Council. So here, the Secretary General himself confirms the threat that sanctions, unilateral sanctions, and unilateral coercive measures could bring for international peace and security. This confirms that Secretary General was concerned about the negative effects of sanctions on peace and security. Here, the Agenda for Peace talks about sanctions which has the permit of the Security Council, and we can say that definitely unilateral coercive measures which does not have the confirmation of the UN is definitely a threat to peace and security. We also see that in resolution 53/243 of the United Nations dated 6 October 1995 entitled Declaration and Program of Action on a Culture of Peace, paragraph 15I recommends proper consideration for the issue of the humanitarian impacts of sanctions, in particular on women and children. Again, it confirms that sanctions are a threat to international peace and security. It was for the same reason that in 2005 World Summit Declaration, the General Assembly called on Security Council to ensure that fair and clear procedures are in place for the imposition and lifting of sanctions measures. The reason was the fear about the negative implications of sanctions on the international peace and security, as well as the negative impacts on human rights. Now, in the third part of my statement, I would like to refer to UCMs as a serious violation of human rights. UCMs are serious violation of human rights and are crimes against humanity. In the past 2 years, during the COVID-19 pandemic, a rich literature has been developed by Human Rights Mechanism about this issue. The Special Rapporteur on the negative impacts of UCMs on the enjoyment of human rights has produced several